Nathan Grayson pushed open the glass door of his Manhattan penthouse, his rolling suitcase squealing softly across the marble floor. He had just returned from 3 days of investor talks in San Francisco. His company, Grayson Tech, was preparing to launch a new product, a cloud platform for small businesses. He was exhausted but pleased. The deal was worth millions. He took off his jacket, hung it on a coat rack by the entrance, and inhaled deeply. The penthouse smelled clean. His wife, Laura, always kept it neat. "Laura, I'm home," he shouted, loosening his tie. Footsteps came from the living room. Laura appeared in the doorway, dressed in a simple gray dress. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a messy bun, and she held a glass of white wine. She smiled, but Nathan noticed that it was forced. Laura's eyes, usually bright, seemed dull. "Hello, dear," she said, coming closer. "How was the trip?" Nathan leaned in to kiss her cheek, but Laura pulled away slightly, pretending to fix her hair. He frowned, but decided not to pay attention to it. "Tiring, but productive," he said, heading for the bar in the corner of the living room. "The investors signed a contract. We'll get funding to launch the platform. Want to grab a drink with me? Let's celebrate." Laura shook her head and took a sip from her glass. "No, thank you. I already—" She hesitated. "I already have wine." Nathan poured himself a whiskey, dropped a couple of ice cubes into the glass, and turned to face her. He leaned against the bar and looked at his wife. Laura stood by the window, looking out at the lights of New York. Her fingers nervously fiddled with the rim of her glass. "Are you okay?" he asked. "You look tired." Laura turned to face him, her face tense. "Yes, everything is fine. It was just a long day. Lots of things to do at the foundation." Laura headed their charity, which helped schools in poor areas. Nathan had always been proud of her work, although he sometimes suspected that she was using the foundation as an excuse to spend less time at home. He shook the thought off and took a sip of whiskey. "Tell me what's new at the foundation," he suggested, trying to diffuse the situation. "How are your projects going?" Laura shrugged and sat down on the sofa, tucking her legs under her. "Nothing special. We are preparing a new program for high school students. Computer courses. I met with partners today, discussed the budget." "Sounds cool," Nathan said, sitting down in a leather chair across from her. "I can hook up with the guys at Grayson Tech if needed. They can help with software or hardware." "Thank you, I'll think about it," Laura replied, but her tone was distant. She looked at her glass as if there was something interesting in it. Nathan frowned. Usually Laura talked enthusiastically about the foundation, shared her plans, and asked his advice. Today she was different, withdrawn, almost cold. He decided to change the subject. "Maybe we should order dinner. I'm starving. They fed us some crap on the plane." Laura nodded but did not look up. "Sure. What do you want? Italian or sushi?" "Let's have Italian," Nathan said. "Truffle pasta from that place on Fifth Avenue. You love their sauce." "Okay, I'll order," Laura replied, pulling out her phone. Her fingers moved quickly across the screen, but Nathan noticed that she erased the text several times, as if she couldn't concentrate. He finished his whiskey and put the glass on the coffee table. "Laura, are you sure you're okay?" he asked, leaning forward. "You seem kind of, I don't know, weird." Laura looked up, and for a second Nathan thought he saw panic in her eyes. But she quickly composed herself and smiled. "Nathan, I'm just tired. Really, it's okay. Let's order some food and relax, okay?" "Okay," he said, but inside he was growing restless. He'd known Laura for 5 years, 3 of which they'd been married. She was rarely this distant. Something was wrong, but he didn't want to push. Not yet. Laura finished ordering food and put her phone on the couch. "Delivery will be in 40 minutes, she said. "Want to watch something? Maybe a TV series?" Nathan shrugged. "Yes, I can. What were you watching while I was gone?" "Nothing special," Laura replied. "I was scrolling through Netflix, but nothing caught my eye. Maybe you'll pick it up." Nathan picked up the remote and turned on the TV. He flipped through the catalog, but his thoughts weren't on the shows. He kept glancing at Laura. She sat staring into her drink, silent. Nathan decided to try again. "Listen, if something happens, you know you can tell me, right?" he said, trying to speak softly. Laura looked at him, and this time her smile was a little more sincere. "I know, Nathan. Thanks. It's been a rough day. Let's just have dinner and rest, okay?" "Okay," he agreed, but his suspicions remained. He decided he would talk to her tomorrow when she was in a better mood. They had chosen a detective series, but Nathan Barley followed the plot. He was thinking about Laura, about her strange behavior, about how she avoided his gaze. When the delivery brought the food, they set the table in the dining room. Nathan opened a bottle of red wine, and Laura set out plates of pasta. "It looks delicious," he said, trying to bring the conversation back to normal. "Yes, they always make a great sauce," Laura replied, but her voice was flat, without enthusiasm. They ate mostly in silence. Nathan talked about the trip, about how one of the investors had almost ruined the deal, but Laura just nodded and occasionally made short remarks. "What's new with you?" he asked when the pause dragged on. "Besides the foundation, maybe you met with friends?" Laura froze with a fork in her hand. "No, not really with anyone," she said. "I was busy. You know how it is." "I know," Nathan said, but his tone was a little sharper. "It's just that you usually tell people who you saw and what you did. But today you don't seem to be in the mood." Laura put down her fork and looked into his eyes. "Nathan, I told you, I'm tired. Why are you picking on me?" "I'm not being picky," he said. "I just want to know what's going on. You're my wife, Laura. If something's wrong, I need to know." She sighed and leaned back in her chair. "Nothing's going on, Nathan. Just give me some space, okay? It's not every day that I have to be on top." Nathan gritted his teeth, but nodded. "Okay, sorry if I'm going too far." Laura nodded back and went back to eating. The rest of the meal was spent in silence. Nathan felt a knot growing in his chest. He wasn't sure what was bothering him, but his gut told him that Laura was hiding something. After dinner, she went to bed early, saying she wanted to go to bed. Nathan stayed in the living room, looking out the large window at the city lights. He pulled out his phone and opened their shared calendar. Laura always scheduled her appointments, but there had been suspiciously few entries in the last few weeks. He scrolled through her contacts, but saw nothing out of the ordinary. Then he opened his bank app and checked their joint account. Nothing out of the ordinary, the usual expenses for the foundation, restaurants, shops. But something still bothered him. Nathan finished his wine and decided that he would have a serious talk with Laura tomorrow. If she didn't want to share, he would find a way to find out the truth. He turned off the TV, put the dishes in the dishwasher, and headed to the bedroom. Laura was already in bed, facing the window. Her breathing was even, but Nathan suspected that she was not sleeping. "Good night," he said quietly. "Good night," Laura replied without turning around. Nathan lay down next to him, but sleep wouldn't come. He stared at the ceiling, replaying their conversation in his head. Nathan sat at the kitchen island in their penthouse, scrolling through the morning news on his tablet. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the kitchen, and outside the large windows, Manhattan was already bustling with life. He took a sip of espresso and glanced at his watch, 7 in the morning. Laura usually got up later, but today he could hear her moving around in the bedroom. Nathan hoped she would be in a better mood after the stress of the previous evening. The bathroom door opened and Laura came out, holding onto the wall. Her face was pale, her hair slightly disheveled. She was in her pajamas, a white silk shirt and shorts, but she looked like she hadn't slept all night. Nathan put his tablet down and frowned. "Laura, are you okay?" he asked, standing up. "What happened?" Laura waved her hand, motioning for him to stay away, and headed for the sink. She poured a glass of water and drank it down in one gulp, her back to Nathan. Her shoulders were tense. "It's okay," she said, but her voice was shaking. "I just feel a little nauseous." Feeling sick, Nathan came closer, but stopped a few steps away. "Did you eat something yesterday? Maybe the pasta wasn't fresh. Laura shook her head and turned to him. Her eyes were red, as if she had been crying. She set the glass down on the counter and took a deep breath. "No, it's not food," she said quietly. "Nathan, I need to tell you something." Nathan felt his insides tighten. Her tone, her look, everything said this wasn't just a conversation about feeling unwell. He crossed his arms and nodded. "Okay, speak." Laura swallowed and looked into his eyes, her fingers fiddling nervously with the hem of her pajama top. "I'm pregnant," she blurted out. Nathan froze. The word hung in the air like a hammer blow. He looked at Laura, trying to process what she had said. Pregnant. His mind refused to accept it. He and Laura had talked about children before they were married. Nathan had been adamant. No children. His own childhood, a drunken father, screaming, beatings had left scars he did not want to pass on. Laura had agreed then, said that their life together, their career, their foundation were enough for her. And now? "What?" he asked, his voice low, almost threatening. "Are you serious?" Laura nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "Yes, Nathan. I found out a couple of days ago. I took a test, then another one. I don't know how it happened. How did this happen?" Nathan raised his voice, taking a step towards her. "Laura, we agreed. No children. You yourself said that you were okay with it." "I know," she shouted back, stepping back. "I didn't plan this, Nathan. It just happened." Nathan gritted his teeth, trying to contain his anger. He turned and paced the kitchen, running a hand through his hair. His thoughts were a jumble. Pregnancy? It was impossible. Not just because of their agreement, but because he knew the truth about himself. At 20, after a motorcycle accident, doctors had told him he was sterile. He'd taken tests, then more, to be sure. The chance of conceiving was zero. He'd never told Laura this, he didn't see the point, since they'd decided not to have children. But now, he stopped and looked at Laura. She was standing at the sink, her arms wrapped around herself, looking at the floor. Her face was a mixture of fear and guilt. Nathan felt something dark boiling in his chest. If he was sterile and Laura was pregnant, that could only mean one thing. "Laura," he said slowly, trying to keep his voice even. "How long have you known?" She looked up, her lips trembling. "I told you for a couple of days. I wanted to tell you right away, but you were on a trip, and I didn't know how you'd react." "What were you going to do?" he asked, coming closer. "Just keep quiet? Did you think I wouldn't notice?" "No," she cried. "I didn't mean to keep quiet. I was just trying to figure out how to tell you. This is a shock to me too, Nathan." He looked at her, and there was one question in his head that he was afraid to ask. But he had to know. He took a step forward and lowered his voice. "Laura, tell me the truth. This child, is it mine?" Her eyes widened, and for a second Nathan thought she was going to faint. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Her silence was louder than any words. Nathan felt his blood run cold. "Laura," he repeated, his voice hardening. "Answer me. Is this my child?" She swallowed and nodded, but the movement was uncertain. "Of course it's yours," she said, but her voice was shaking. "Nathan, how can you ask such a thing?" He looked into her eyes, hoping for the truth. But all he saw was fear. She was lying. He knew it as clearly as he knew the sun would rise tomorrow. His infertility was a fact, confirmed by doctors. If Laura was pregnant, the baby wasn't his, and that meant she had cheated on him. Nathan stepped back, his hands clenched into fists. He wanted to scream, to throw something, but instead he forced himself to breathe evenly. "Okay," he said finally, "I believe you." Laura blinked, clearly not expecting that answer. "Really?" she asked, her voice full of hope. "Yes," he lied, "but we need to talk about this. This is big news. We need to decide what to do." Laura nodded, wiping away her tears. "Of course. I know it's unexpected. I'm shocked. But we'll figure it out, right?" "We'll figure it out," Nathan said, but his mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about who the father might be, about how long Laura had lied to him, and what he would do when he found out the truth. "I need to get to the office," he said, heading out of the kitchen. "I have a meeting at 9. We'll talk tonight." "Nathan, wait," Laura called, but he was already in the hallway. "Aren't you angry?" He stopped and looked at her over his shoulder. "I'm not angry," he said. "I just need time to process this." Laura nodded, but her face was full of doubt. Nathan walked out of the kitchen, grabbed his jacket and keys. In the elevator, he leaned against the wall and closed his eyes. His world had just collapsed. Nathan sat in his office on the 35th floor of a skyscraper in Midtown Manhattan. The lights of the city sparkled outside the huge window, but he didn't notice them. His laptop was open, but the screen had long since gone dark. Nathan hadn't touched the keyboard in half an hour. One thought was spinning in his head. Laura had cheated on him. He was sure of it. His infertility, which he had discovered when he was young, made it impossible for her to get pregnant. And that meant someone else was the father of her child. He leaned back in his chair and rubbed his temples. The scene in the kitchen that morning kept coming back to him. Laura had looked guilty, her voice shaking, her eyes darting. She was lying, and Nathan knew it. But who? Who could have been so close to her that she would do something like this? He began to replay their lives over the past months in his mind, looking for clues. Laura had been staying late at foundation meetings for a long time. She said it was sponsors, partners, new projects. But now Nathan was starting to have doubts. He remembered how a couple of weeks ago she had come home late, her cheeks flushed, and said she had been to dinner with colleagues. He hadn't paid attention to it then, but now every detail seemed suspicious. Her phone had become her shadow, too. She wouldn't let it out of her hands, even when they were alone. And those calls. Laura often went into another room to answer them, or hung up if Nathan was nearby. He pulled out his phone and opened their shared calendar. Laura always had appointments on there, but in recent weeks there had been fewer entries. Instead of specific meeting with foundation partners or lunch with the school principal, there were vague to-do or meeting. Nathan frowned. This wasn't like her. Laura was usually meticulous. He put his phone down and stood up, walking to the window. His reflection in the glass looked tired. Nathan knew he couldn't work until he figured this out. He needed specifics, evidence. He walked back to his desk, grabbed his keys, and decided to go home. Laura was supposed to be at the foundation office, which meant he had a chance to check her things. Maybe he'd find something that would confirm his suspicions. The house was quiet. Nathan threw his jacket on the couch and headed for their bedroom. The penthouse looked the same as always, immaculately clean, everything in its place. Laura was obsessed with order, and that always calmed him. But now even that seemed part of her mask. He opened her nightstand, but there was only a book, a charger, and a pack of mints. Nothing out of the ordinary. Then he walked over to her desk in her office. Laura sometimes worked from home, and her laptop was always there. Nathan knew her password. They'd shared that kind of thing when they were first married. But he didn't want to go through her computer. It was too risky. Laura might notice if he changed anything. Instead, he decided to check her phone. She often left it charging in the bedroom or kitchen. Nathan went back into the kitchen and looked around. The phone was nowhere to be found. He checked the living room, the bedroom, even the bathroom. Nothing. Laura must have taken it with her. This only increased his suspicions. Why would she guard the phone so much if she had nothing to hide? He was about to leave when he noticed her bag on the rack by the door. Laura changed bags sometimes, and this one looked like the one she'd taken yesterday. Nathan hesitated. It was beneath him to go through her things, but he had to know. He opened the bag and started rummaging through them. Wallet, keys, lipstick, a couple of coffee shop receipts. Then his fingers hit something hard. He pulled out Laura's old phone, the model she'd been using before he got her a new iPhone for her birthday. Nathan frowned. Why would she keep an old phone in her bag? He pressed the power button and, to his surprise, the screen lit up. The battery was almost empty, but the phone worked. He knew the password too. Laura used the same one for all her devices. He entered the code and the phone unlocked. He opened the gallery first, but there were only old photos. His trip to Italy with Laura, dinners with friends, a few shots from Foundation events. Nothing suspicious. Then he clicked on the messages. Most of the chats were empty. Laura had probably been cleaning them out. But one name caught his eye, Aiden. Aiden Clark had been his best friend since college. They had founded Grace on Tech together, and Aiden had been his main partner in the business up until now. Nathan trusted him like a brother. But now, looking at Aiden's name in the chat list, his heart began to beat faster. He opened the correspondence. There were few messages, but each of them was like a punch in the gut. Laura, 10 days ago. Can we meet at 7? Nathan is leaving for Chicago. Eden. Yes, at our place. I'll book a table. Laura, 8 days ago. Are you sure he won't suspect anything? Eden. Nathan is too busy with his deals. Relax. Laura, 5 days ago. I need to talk to you. It's important. Eden. What happened? Is everything okay? Laura. Not on the phone. See you tomorrow. Nathan stared at the screen, his hands shaking. He read the messages again, trying to convince himself that this was a mistake, that he had misunderstood. But the facts were there. Laura had been seeing Aiden behind his back, and judging by her last message, she was about to tell him about the pregnancy. He turned off his phone and put it back in his bag, trying to keep everything as it was. His mind was racing. Aiden, his best friend, the person he trusted most. Was he the baby's father? Nathan felt the anger boiling inside him, but he forced himself to breathe evenly. He couldn't act on emotion. He needed proof and a plan. Nathan walked back into the living room and sat on the couch, staring into space. He remembered how Aiden had acted at the last meeting at the office. He had been his usual self, joking, discussing plans, clapping Nathan on the shoulder. Nothing out of the ordinary. But now Nathan saw it in a different light. Aiden knew he was sleeping with his wife, and he still looked into his eyes. Nathan's phone vibrated, a message from Laura. Laura, I'll be late at the Foundation office. I'll be there by 8. Do you want me to order dinner? Nathan gritted his teeth. She was lying again. He knew the Foundation closed at 6, and Laura rarely stayed late. He wrote back. Nathan, okay, order something. I'm home. He sent the message and leaned back on the couch. His thoughts were clear. Laura and Aiden had betrayed him. But he wasn't going to make a scene or hit them, Aiden's face, although he really wanted to. No, he would be smarter. He would use his resources, his connections, his intelligence to destroy them. And he would do it in such a way that they would not even understand who destroyed them. Nathan stood up and walked to the bar. He poured himself a whiskey, but didn't drink it. Instead, he looked at the glass and said out loud, as if making a promise to himself, "You both will regret it." Nathan sat in his penthouse office, staring at his laptop screen. It was past midnight, but he couldn't sleep. After finding Laura and Aiden's messages on her old phone, there was little doubt left. But almost wasn't enough. He needed hard evidence. He didn't want to base his revenge on assumptions. The risk of being wrong was too great. Nathan opened his browser and started searching for private investigators in New York. He needed someone discreet, professional, and fast. After an hour of searching, he settled on Gray Line Investigations. Their website promised confidentiality and quick results. Nathan dialed the number listed in the contacts. On the third ring, a male voice answered, low and businesslike. Gray Line, this is Mark Reynolds. How can I help you? I need your help, Nathan said, trying to keep his voice calm. This is personal. I need you to follow a person, my wife. There was a pause on the other end of the line, but the voice remained even. Got it. Can you give me some details? What exactly do you want to know? Nathan took a deep breath. I suspect she's having an affair. I want to know with whom, when, and where. I need proof. Photos, videos, recordings, anything you can get your hands on. Okay, Reynolds said. This is standard work. We'll need her name, her photo, her schedule, her habits. The more information you have, the faster we can get it done. Also, how urgently do you need this? As soon as possible, Nathan said. Money is no problem. Great. Let's meet tomorrow and discuss the details. Name the place and time. Nathan suggested a cafe downtown, not far from his office, for 9 in the morning. Reynolds agreed, and they said goodbye. Nathan leaned back in his chair, adrenaline pumping through his veins. He had made the first move. Now all he had to do was wait. The next morning, Nathan sat in the corner of the cafe, sipping black coffee. He had put on dark glasses and a baseball cap to avoid attention. His face occasionally appeared in business magazines, and he didn't want to be asked too many questions. At exactly 9, a man in his 40s, in a gray suit, with a short haircut and a sharp gaze, approached his table. He extended his hand. Mark Reynolds, are you Nathan Grayson? Nathan nodded and shook his hand. Yes, sit down. Reynolds sat down opposite, placing a thin folder on the table. He glanced around the cafe as if checking for prying ears and began to speak. I made inquiries. You are the owner of Grayson Tech, right? That simplifies matters. You have the resources, and I have the experience. Tell me what's going on. Nathan told her everything. About Laura's pregnancy, about his infertility, about his wife's strange behavior, about the messages with Aiden. He gave Reynolds her photo, the schedule of the foundation's meetings, and a list of places she frequented. The detective listened attentively, making notes in a notebook. You suspect this Aiden Clark, your partner? Reynolds asked when Nathan had finished. Yes, Nathan said, but I want to be sure. If it's not him, I need to know who it is. Got it, Reynolds nodded. We'll start surveillance today. I'll have 2 of my men involved. They'll keep an eye on your wife and Clark. These types of cases usually take 3 days to a week. Are you prepared for what you might see? Nathan gritted his teeth. I'm already prepared for the worst. Just do your job. Reynolds nodded and handed over the contract. Sign here. Advance payment $5,000, the rest upon completion. We will contact you as soon as there is something concrete. Nathan signed the papers, handed over the envelope of cash, and stood up. Keep me updated. 4 days passed. Nathan tried to act as usual, went to the office, had meetings, smiled at Laura at dinner. But inside, he was on edge. Every word she said, every look she gave him seemed like a lie. She kept talking about the foundation, about some new programs, but Nathan no longer believed a word of it. He waited for a call from Reynolds. On the 5th day, late in the evening, his phone vibrated. It was Reynolds. Mr. Grayson, we have material, he said without preamble. Can you come over? I'm in the office. I'll be there in an hour, Nathan replied and grabbed the keys. Gray Line Investigations was in a nondescript building in Brooklyn. Reynolds met him at the door and led him into a small room with a computer monitor and a stack of files on the desk. He looked tired but businesslike. Sit down, he said, pointing to a chair. I'll show you what we've found, but I warn you, you won't like it. Nathan nodded, his throat dry. Show me. Reynolds opened the folder and laid out a series of photographs. The first showed Laura and Aiden sitting in a restaurant on the outskirts of town, their hands intertwined on the table, and Laura smiling in a way she hadn't smiled at Nathan in a long time. The second showed them leaving a hotel, Aiden with his arm around Laura's waist. The third showed them kissing in Aiden's car. Nathan looked at the pictures, his heart sinking. This was worse than he expected. He thought he was prepared, but reality hit like a truck. His wife and his best friend. Double betrayal. That's not all, Reynolds said, turning on the monitor. Here's a recording of their conversation. We put a microphone in Clark's car. A video appeared on the screen. Aiden and Laura were sitting in his car, parked near some park. The sound was clear. Aiden, I don't know how to tell him, Laura said, her voice shaking. He'll be furious. He won't know, Aiden replied, stroking her hand. We'll be careful. And the baby, let him think it's his. I don't want to lie to him forever, Laura said, turning away. It's wrong. Laura, you know I love you, Aiden said. We'll find a way out, together. The video ended. Nathan sat silently, his hands clenched into fists. He felt the anger and pain battling inside him. Laura hadn't just cheated on him, she'd been making plans with Aiden, discussing their child, their future. And he, Nathan, was a hindrance to her. "When was this taken?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "Last night," Reynolds said. "They meet regularly. Restaurant, hotel, sometimes his apartment. We can keep following if you want more details." "No," Nathan said, standing up. "That's enough." He took the folder of photos and the flash drive with a recording that Reynolds had given him. His hands were shaking, but he kept his composure. "Thank you for your work," he said. "I'll transfer the rest today." Reynolds nodded. "If you need anything, call." Nathan left the office and got into his car. He didn't drive home. Instead, he parked by the river and opened the folder. He looked at the photos over and over until Laura and Aiden's faces began to blur. The pain was unbearable, but it was giving way to another feeling, a cold, calculating rage. Nathan sat in his home office, lit only by the dim light of a desk lamp. On the desk in front of him was a folder of photographs and a flash drive from Reynolds, but he didn't touch them yet. Instead, he opened the safe built into the wall behind the bookcase. Inside, among the real estate deeds and Gray Sontech stock, was their prenuptial agreement, a thick stack of papers he and Laura had signed 3 years ago. Nathan pulled it out, closed the safe, and returned to his desk. He hadn't looked at the contract since he and Laura had signed it before their wedding. It had seemed like a formality, then his lawyer had insisted on asset protection, given Gray Sontech's rapid growth. Laura had agreed without argument, even joking that she didn't want his millions, just his love. Now it sounded like a joke. Nathan opened the folder and began flipping through the pages, his eyes darting over the lines, searching for the section he was looking for. The contract had been drawn up by New York's finest lawyers. It protected everything: his company, his accounts, his real estate, even his future income. But the one that interested Nathan now was the adultery clause. He found it on page 6 in bold type. Article 7.2, Adultery. In the event of proven infidelity by one of the parties confirmed by documentation, including but not limited to witness testimony, correspondence, photo or video materials, the guilty party loses the right to any financial claims, including alimony, division of property, and access to joint assets. All jointly acquired assets, including funds and joint accounts, pass into the full ownership of the injured party. Nathan read the text twice to make sure he hadn't missed anything. The terms were ironclad. If he could prove Laura had cheated on him and Reynolds's photos and notes were more than enough, she would be left with nothing. The penthouse, their Hamptons vacation home, and even her favorite charity, which was funded by their joint budget, would be gone. She would lose everything she had ever counted on. He put the contract aside and picked up the flash drive. He had the evidence in his pocket, but Nathan wasn't going to rush to court right now. He wanted Laura and Aiden to feel the effects of this slowly, like poison coursing through their veins. The contract was his greatest weapon, but he had to use it wisely. Nathan stood and walked to the window. The city lights twinkled below, but he couldn't see them. His thoughts were on Laura. How could she? He remembered their first meeting. She was volunteering at a tech conference his company sponsored. Her energy, her smile, her passion for helping others, it had all captivated him. He thought he'd found his soulmate, and now she was sleeping with his best friend and carrying his child. He returned to his desk and opened his laptop. He needed to check their financial accounts to see how dependent Laura was on his money. He logged into his banking app and began scanning through the transactions. Most of Laura's expenses were for the foundation: office rent, staff salaries, events. But there were also personal expenses: Fifth Avenue boutiques, spas, restaurants. Nathan had noticed several large write-offs in recent months: a jewelry store, a trip to Miami. He frowned. Miami? Laura hadn't mentioned any trip. He made a note to check later. Then he opened their joint investment portfolio. Millions of dollars in stocks, bonds, real estate, all protected by contract. If Laura lost access to the money, her fund would collapse, and her lifestyle, the fancy dresses, the expensive dinners, the travel would disappear. Nathan knew that would hit her the hardest. Laura loved her reputation as a philanthropist, her role in society. Without the money, she would be nothing. He closed the laptop and picked up the contract. It wasn't just a document, it was leverage he'd use to destroy her world. But Aiden was another problem. The contract didn't apply to him, but Nathan would find a way for him. He remembered how Aiden had always envied his success, his leadership at Graysontech. Maybe that was what had pushed him into Laura's arms, envy mixed with desire. Nathan put the contract back in the safe and locked it. He decided that he wouldn't do anything for now. He needed time to gather more information, to think of a plan. He didn't want to just get a divorce and kick Laura out. He wanted her and Aiden to suffer, to understand that Nathan Grayson's betrayal had a price. Nathan stood at the stove in their penthouse, stirring pasta sauce. The aroma of basil and garlic filled the kitchen, and a bottle of red wine and 2 glasses were already on the table. He had decided to give Laura the perfect evening dinner conversation, no hint of his suspicions. This was his first step, to lull her into a false sense of control. Nathan knew that Laura had felt distant from him since their conversation that morning about the pregnancy. Now he had to play the role of a loving husband to make her relax. The door clicked open and Laura walked into the apartment, taking off her coat. Her hair was slightly tousled by the wind, and she was holding a bag with the foundation's logo. She looked tired, but when she saw Nathan at the stove, she stopped and raised her eyebrows in surprise. "Nathan, are you cooking?" she asked, coming closer. He turned around and smiled, trying to make it look genuine. "I thought I'd spoil you," he said, drying his hands with a towel. "You've been on your feet all day, and I thought we could use an evening together." Laura put her bag on a chair and walked up to him, her eyes scanning his face as if looking for a catch. "That's nice," she said carefully. "What's for dinner?" "Your favorite carbonara," Nathan replied, pointing to the frying pan. "And wine. Sit down, it'll be ready in a minute." Laura nodded and sat at the kitchen island, watching him set the plates. Nathan noticed that she was fiddling nervously with the bracelet on her wrist, a habit she had when she was nervous. He resisted the urge to ask where she had been and poured her some wine instead. "How was your day?" he asked, handing her the glass. "What's new at the foundation?" Laura took a sip and shrugged. "The usual fuss. I met with a new sponsor, discussed a grant for computer classes. Nothing special." "That sounds like progress," Nathan said, setting a plate of pasta in front of her. "You're always so enthusiastic about your work. I'm proud of you." Laura looked at him, and for a second her face softened. "Thank you, Nathan. That's nice to hear." He sat down opposite her, raised his glass, and lightly touched hers. "For us," he said, looking into her eyes. "For us," Laura repeated, but her voice was a little quieter. She quickly looked away and began to eat. Nathan ate slowly, keeping the conversation light. He asked about her plans, joked about how she always forgot to turn off the lights in her office, and told her about his meeting with investors. Laura answered, but Nathan could feel her tension. She tried to appear relaxed, but her smiles were forced, her answers short. He knew she was thinking about her secret, about the baby, about Aiden, and that was exactly what he wanted, to make her nervous, to make her afraid that he would suspect something. After dinner, Laura suggested watching a movie, but Nathan said he had some work emails to answer. He kissed her forehead, a gesture that made him wince, and went into his office. He closed the door and exhaled. Playing the loving husband was harder than he expected. Every look she gave him, every word she said, reminded him of his betrayal. But he couldn't let his emotions get the better of him. He had a goal. Nathan opened his laptop and logged into Graysontech's corporate system. As CEO, he had access to all of the company's financial reports and operations. Aiden, as his partner, was in charge of marketing and investor relations, but also had access to a number of accounts. Nathan decided to start there. If Aiden was cheating on him with Laura, then maybe he wasn't so clean in business either. He opened up a transaction analysis program, and began scanning through the last 6 months of transactions. Most were standard: contractor payments, advertising campaigns, office leases. But Nathan noticed a few unusual transfers. Small amounts, $10 to $50,000, were going to a company called Brightwave Consulting. The name didn't seem familiar. Nathan opened the contractor database and typed in a query. Brightwave Consulting turned out to be registered in Delaware, but its website was empty, just a template with generic phrases about strategic consulting. No names, no contacts. That made him wary. He checked the payment history. The transfers had started 4 months ago, and they were all signed by Aiden. "What are you up to, Aiden?" Nathan muttered, taking screenshots. He sent a request to his CFO, asking for a detailed report on Brightwave and their services. To avoid raising suspicion, he added a few more contractors to the email, as if it were a routine check. Then he opened Aiden's personal account in the system. He knew the password, since they shared access in case of emergencies. Nathan felt a slight twinge of guilt, but suppressed it. Aiden was untrustworthy. In his outbox, he found correspondence between Aiden and a man named David Lawson, who claimed to be the CEO of Brightwave. Aiden asked Lawson to prepare an optimization report and mentioned that the next payment is on the way. Nathan copied the emails and began searching for information about Lawson. A quick search revealed that David Lawson was a real person, but one with a dubious reputation. His name had appeared in articles about financial schemes and offshore accounts. Nathan leaned back in his chair, his lips curling into a cold smile. This was dirt. If Aiden was using the company to siphon money or otherwise commit fraud, it could be used against him. But Nathan didn't want to act right away. He needed more data to make a clean hit. He closed his laptop and picked up his phone. Laura was still in the living room. He could hear the TV on. Nathan texted her. "Nathan, finished with the letters. Want some ice cream? I can run to the store." A minute later, the answer came. "Laura, oh yes, that would be great. Vanilla, please." Nathan nodded to himself. Let her think he cared about her. Let her feel safe. He put on his jacket and left the apartment, but instead of going to the store, he went to a nearby all-night cafe. There he called Mark Reynolds, his detective. "Mark, this is Nathan Grayson," he said when Grayson answered. "I need you to check something else, not just Laura and Aiden. There's a company, Brightwave Consulting, and a man named David Lawson. I want to know everything: accounts, connections, transactions." "Understood," Reynolds replied. "Does this have anything to do with your case?" "Very," Nathan said. "And one more thing. Check to see if Laura has met Lawson, just in case." "It will be done. Give me a couple of days." Nathan hung up and bought an ice cream at the cafe. As he walked home, he felt confidence growing inside him. He had started his game. Laura and Aiden didn't know it yet, but their world was already falling apart. But they would feel it soon. When he entered the apartment, Laura was sitting on the sofa, covered with a blanket. She smiled when she saw the ice cream. "You're the best," she said, accepting the container. Nathan sat down next to her and put his arm around her shoulders, suppressing his disgust. "Everything for you," he said, kissing her temple. Laura relaxed in his arms, and Nathan looked at her face, thinking only one thing: this is just the beginning. Nathan sat in the Grayson Tech conference room, listening to his CFO, Melissa, present her quarterly earnings report. His eyes were glued to his laptop, but his mind was elsewhere. It had been a week since he'd received evidence of Laura and Aiden's affair, and every day he'd been refining his plan. The prenuptial agreement was his weapon against Laura, and against Aiden, he'd been gathering dirt on the suspicious payments Brightwave Consulting had made to him. But that wasn't enough. Nathan didn't just want to punish them, he wanted them to destroy each other. Today, he was going to sow the first seeds of discord. Aiden sat across the table from him, scrolling through a presentation on his tablet. He looked his usual self, confident, with a slight smile, as if he had everything in the world under control. Nathan resisted the urge to clench his fists. Instead, he nodded at Melissa when she finished and took the floor. "Great job, Melissa," he said, standing up. But there's one more thing I want to discuss. We've noticed a data leak on our new project. Someone leaked the platform details to one of our competitors. This is serious. The room went silent. Aiden looked up from his tablet, his eyebrows raising slightly. A leak? He asked. Nathan, are you sure? Who reported it? Our cybersecurity department, Nathan said, looking directly at Aiden. They've tracked suspicious activity. Someone from the inside has sent files from the server to an external address. We've already started investigating. It was a lie, but Nathan had done his homework. That morning, he'd asked his IT director, Tom, to create a fake breach report showing access from an account tied to the marketing department, Aiden's area of responsibility. Tom didn't ask questions. Nathan was the boss, and his word was law. The report sat in Nathan's folder, ready to go. That's bullshit, Aiden said, leaning back in his chair. My people didn't leak anything. You know how we handle security. I know, Nathan said, his tone calm, almost friendly. But facts are facts. We'll check everyone who has access. It's nothing personal, Aiden. Aiden frowned but nodded. Okay, do what you have to. But this is a mistake. Nathan smiled, but inside he was jubilant. He saw Aiden tense up. The seed of doubt had been planted. Now Aiden would suspect everyone around him, including Laura, who was a frequent visitor to the office and had access to shared files through their joint projects with the foundation. That evening, Nathan sat in his office at home, checking his email. Laura was in the living room, leafing through a magazine, pretending to read. Nathan knew she was waiting for him to continue the perfect evenings he had been creating for the past few days. But today, he had a different task. He opened an anonymous email service he found on the dark web. Using a VPN, he created a temporary address and began writing a message to Laura. His fingers flew quickly across the keyboard. Subject, do you trust him? Text Laura, do you think Aiden is faithful to you? Ask him who he was with at the Blue Haven last Friday. You're not the only one he's playing with. Nathan reread the text. It was short but venomous. He knew Aiden had been at Blue Haven with his coworkers. It was on his calendar, which Nathan had checked through the corporate system. But Laura didn't know that, and the implication of another woman was bound to hurt her. He included the photo of Aiden leaving the bar that Reynolds had given him, and sent the message to Laura's personal email. When Nathan finished, he closed his laptop and walked out into the living room. Laura looked up from her magazine and smiled. Are you finished yet? She asked. Do you want to watch anything? Sure, Nathan said, sitting down next to her. Choose. Laura put on a rom-com, but Nathan noticed her glancing at her phone every now and then. 10 minutes later, she excused herself and went into the bathroom, taking her phone with her. Nathan suppressed a smile. She had received a letter, and judging by her haste, she had already started reading it. The next day, Nathan noticed a change in Aiden. During the morning meeting, he was irritable, giving short answers and glancing at his phone. Nathan decided to add fuel to the fire. During a break, he approached Aiden in the break room. Hey, are you okay? He asked, pouring himself some coffee. You look like you haven't slept. Aiden shrugged, but his jaw was tense. It's just stress, he said. This leak thing, I don't want my people to get hit. I understand, Nathan nodded. But you know how it happens. Sometimes you trust people, and they let you down, even those who are close. Aiden looked at him, a wary look in his eyes. What do you mean? Nothing, Nathan said, shrugging. I'm just saying you have to be careful, even with people who seem trustworthy. He walked away, leaving Aiden standing there with his cup in his hand. Nathan knew his words had hurt. Aiden would now be suspicious of everyone, including Laura, especially after Nathan had accidentally mentioned to Tom that he had seen Laura in the office late at night, copying files. It was a lie, but Tom, a gossip lover, would surely pass it on to Aiden. That evening, Nathan received a message from Reynolds. The detective said that Laura and Aiden had agreed to meet at a cafe on the outskirts of town. Nathan asked Reynolds to record their conversation. He wanted to know how far their suspicions went. The next day, Reynolds sent an audio file. Nathan plugged in his headphones and played the recording. Laura and Aiden's voices were muffled but audible. "Aiden, were you at Blue Haven on Friday?" Laura asked, her tone sharp. "With whom?" "What?" Aiden looked dumbfounded. "With colleagues, Laura. You know, why are you asking?" "They sent me a photo," she said, "and a hint that you were dating someone. Is that true?" "A photo? Who sent you this?" Aiden raised his voice. "Laura, are you serious? I'm with you and you don't believe me." "Do you believe me?" she snapped. "I heard you thought I leaked the data to the competition. Is this your way of thanking me?" "I didn't say that," Aiden countered. "But you were in the office late, copying files. What am I supposed to think?" "I was working, Aiden," Laura almost screamed. "Unlike you, you were probably doing more important things." The conversation ended with Laura leaving, slamming the cafe door. Nathan turned off the recording and leaned back in his chair. Ethan sat at his desk in Grayson-Tech's office, staring at his laptop screen. Open to the report he'd received from Mark Reynolds, the private investigator, the document confirmed his suspicions. Brightwave Consulting, the company Aiden had been transferring money to, was a shell company. Its bank accounts were offshore, and David Lawson, the so-called CEO, was a front man with a history of financial fraud. This was the dirt Nathan had been waiting for. Now he could make his first serious attack on Aiden without revealing his cards. He closed the report and dialed Melissa, his CFO. She answered on the first ring. "Nathan, what happened?" Melissa asked. Her voice was businesslike, but with a hint of weariness. The end of the week was always hard. "Melissa, I want a full audit of all financial transactions for the last 2 years," Nathan said. "Special attention to the marketing department and any payments signed by Aiden. I want everything checked down to the last penny." "An audit?" she asked. "This is unexpected. Is something wrong?" "Just making sure everything is clear," Nathan replied, trying to sound neutral. "We have some big deals on the horizon, and I don't want any surprises. Can you start tomorrow?" "Sure," Melissa said. "I'll bring in an outside firm to speed things up, but it'll take a couple of weeks. Are you sure it's urgent?" "Absolutely," Nathan said. "And one more thing, keep this a secret. Don't tell anyone except the board, not even Aiden." Melissa was silent for a second, but then answered. "Got it. I'll take care of it." Nathan hung up and leaned back in his chair. The audit was his move. He knew the Brightwave transactions would come to light, and Aiden would be the prime suspect. But to make it look credible, Nathan had to back himself up. He opened the company's system and began copying Aiden's correspondence with Lawson, adding it to a separate folder. Then he created several fake emails using an anonymous server to look like internal messages between Aiden and Lawson, in which Aiden allegedly asked to speed up the transfers and cover his tracks. Nathan arranged for these emails to enter the company's system through a vulnerability he had previously discussed with Tom, the director, under the guise of a security review. 3 days later, Nathan called the board of directors for an emergency meeting. He warned them in advance that the topic would be potential financial irregularities. Aiden was also invited, but Nathan kept the details to himself in order to catch him off guard. The boardroom was full. 7 board members, Melissa, Nathan, and Aiden. Aiden sat at the end of the table, leafing through papers, looking slightly irritated. Nathan noticed he hadn't slept. There were dark circles under his eyes. It seemed the fights with Laura that Nathan had provoked were already bearing fruit. Nathan stood up and began to speak, holding a folder containing the preliminary audit report that Melissa had prepared overnight. "Thank you for getting here so quickly," he said, looking around the room. "We have a serious problem. Our audit has uncovered questionable transactions that could threaten the company's reputation. Melissa, please explain." Melissa stood up, turned on the projector, and brought up a table of data on the screen. "We found a series of transfers to a company called Brightwave Consulting," she began. The total amount over the last 6 months is about $300,000. All payments are signed by Aiden Clark. The problem is that Brightwave hasn't provided any services that we can verify. Their reports are duds, and the company itself is registered offshore. Aiden sat up straight, his face turning pale. "What?" he exclaimed. "This is nonsense. I didn't sign anything like that." "Aiden, wait," Nathan said, raising his hand. "Let's get this straight. Melissa, go ahead." Melissa nodded and switched the slide, showing screenshots of the emails Nathan had fed into the system. Here is a correspondence between Aiden and a certain David Lawson, a representative of Brightwave. It discusses fast transfers and requests to avoid unnecessary questions. We also found that Lawson is associated with other shady companies. Aiden jumped up, his fists clenching. "It's a fake," he shouted. "Nathan, you know I would never do anything like that. Someone set me up." "Aiden, sit down," Nathan said coldly. "We're not blaming you. Not yet. But facts are facts. The emails were sent from your account. The signatures on the payments are yours." "It wasn't me." Aiden turned to the board. "You know me. I've been with this company for 10 years. Why would I do this?" One of the directors, an older man named Henry, frowned. "Aiden, no one wants to jump to conclusions. But we have to figure this out. If it's a mistake, we'll fix it. Nathan, what do you suggest?" "A full investigation," Nathan said. "I've already contacted an outside audit firm. They'll start their audit next week. Aiden, you might want to take some time off while this is going on. It's in the company's best interest." Aiden looked at Nathan, his eyes blazing with anger. "Vacation? Are you serious? Are you kicking me out?" "Nobody's kicking you out," Nathan said, his voice even. "We're protecting Grace on Tech's reputation. If you're clean, you have nothing to worry about." Aiden gritted his teeth, but sat down, throwing the file on the table. The board voted on Nathan's proposal, and the meeting ended. Aiden left, slamming the door, and Nathan stayed behind to discuss the details with Melissa. "Are you sure it's him?" she asked when they were alone. Aiden always seemed reliable. "I'm not sure of anything," Nathan lied. "That's why we need an audit. We'll find the truth." Melissa nodded, but her eyes were thoughtful. Nathan knew she trusted him, and that was to his advantage. He walked out of the room, adrenaline pumping through his veins. Laura stood at the register at the coffee shop on the corner of Fifth Avenue, holding her phone and a plastic card. The bartender, a young guy with a tattoo on his wrist, looked at her with mild irritation. She had tried to pay for her latte, but the machine had given her an error. Laura frowned and handed over her other card, the one she and Nathan shared, the one that always worked. "Try this one," she said, trying to smile. The guy swiped the card and shook his head. "Rejected again. Maybe cash?" Laura felt her cheeks heat up. She dug around in her purse, but found only a few dollars in change. That was all she needed. She mumbled an apology, grabbed her bag, and left the coffee on the counter. Outside, she opened her banking app on her phone to check her balance. Her personal account showed a measly $300 she hadn't added to it in a while, relying on the joint cards she and Nathan had. But when she tried to access their joint account, the app gave her an error. "Access is restricted. Contact your bank." Laura stood frozen in the middle of the sidewalk, ignoring the crowd of people passing by. It wasn't the first time. Yesterday, she had tried to pay the rent for the foundation's office, and the card hadn't worked either. At the time, she had written it off as a glitch, but now, she dialed the bank's number, nervously fiddling with the strap of her bag. After 10 minutes of waiting, the operator informed her that her access to the joint accounts had been suspended at the request of the principal owner. "Which owner?" Laura asked, her voice shaking. "It's our joint account." "Mr. Nathan Grayson is listed as the primary holder," the operator replied. "You'll need to contact him to confirm." Laura hung up, her heart pounding. Nathan, had he blocked her cards? She tried to remember their last conversations. Nathan had been acting strange, too caring, too perfect. The dinners, the compliments, the hugs. She'd thought he was just trying to come to terms with the baby, but now she felt like there was more to it. She dialed his number. Nathan answered on the second ring. "Laura, hi." His voice was calm, almost cheerful. "What happened?" "Nathan, my cards aren't working," she said, trying not to lose her temper. "I just tried to pay for a coffee and almost got thrown out the door. The bank says you've restricted my access to my accounts. What's going on?" "Oh shit," Nathan said, a note of annoyance creeping into his tone. "It's probably because of the audit at the company. The bank has stepped up security, checking all our accounts. I told you we had a problem with data leaks, remember?" Laura frowned. She vaguely remembered Nathan mentioning something about an audit, but he hadn't gone into detail. "So they just blocked my cards?" she asked. "Without warning?" "It looks like it," Nathan replied. "It's temporary, Laura. I've already spoken to the bank, and they promised to sort it out in a couple of days. Don't worry." "Don't worry?" Laura raised her voice. "Nathan, I can't even buy coffee. How am I supposed to work? The foundation's office bill is due tomorrow, and I can't pay it." "Look, I know this is inconvenient," Nathan said, his tone softening. "Let's do it this way. I'll transfer the money to your personal account right now. How much do you need for the office?" Laura swallowed, feeling anger mixed with helplessness. 5,000, she said. "But Nathan, this is not normal. Why didn't you warn me?" "I just found out myself," he lied. "The bank didn't notify me in advance. I'm sorry, Laura. I'll figure it out, I promise. In the meantime, use your account. I'll transfer the money in an hour." "Okay," she said, but her voice was full of doubt. "Thank you." "It'll be fine," Nathan added. "See you tonight?" "Yes," Laura answered and hung up. She stood outside, staring at her phone. Nathan sounded convincing, but something about him didn't feel right. She opened the banking app again, hoping that access had been restored, but the error remained. Laura felt panic tighten in her chest. Without money, she couldn't run the foundation, pay her bills, maintain the lifestyle she'd grown accustomed to. What if Nathan knew about her affair with Aiden? She pushed the thought away, but the fear remained. Back at the foundation's office, Laura tried to concentrate on her work, but her thoughts were in a tangle. Her assistant, Kate, noticed her state. "Laura, are you okay?" Kate asked, placing a folder of documents in front of her. "You look pale." "Everything's fine," Laura lied, forcing herself to smile. "Just problems with the bank. The cards were blocked. I'm sorting it out." "Wow, this is stressful," Kate said. "If anything, I can lend you a couple hundred until it's sorted out." "No, thank you," Laura replied. Nathan promised to sort everything out. But Kate's words only made her more anxious. Borrow money? She, Laura Grayson, the wife of a millionaire, shouldn't be asking anyone for a few hundred. It was humiliating. She opened her laptop and checked the foundation's email. There was an email from the office landlord reminding her to pay. If she didn't pay tomorrow, the foundation risked fines or even eviction. Laura covered her face with her hands. Everything was falling apart. She wrote to Aiden, hoping he could calm her down. "Laura, Aiden, I have a problem. The cards are blocked. Nathan says it's because of an audit. Do you know anything?" Aiden responded a few minutes later. "Eden, the audit? It's because of me. They think I wasted money. Laura, you didn't tell Nathan anything about us, did you?" Laura froze, her fingers trembling over the screen. Aiden suspected her. After everything she had done for him, she wrote back. "Laura, are you serious? I didn't say anything, and you seem to be busy with your secrets. What's up with that bar?" Aiden didn't answer. Laura threw the phone on the table and stood up, pacing the office. Her world was shrinking. Nathan was restricting her access to money, Aiden didn't trust her, and the fund was on the verge of collapse. She felt like she was losing control, and that was what scared her most. Meanwhile, Nathan sat in his office at Grayson Tech, reviewing bank transactions. He had deliberately blocked Laura's cards and restricted her access to her accounts, citing technical issues to the bank. This was his next step, to deprive her of her financial freedom, to make her feel vulnerable. He transferred the $5,000 to her personal account as promised, but he delayed it to increase her panic. Nathan sat in his penthouse office, surrounded by silence. On the desk in front of him were folders of evidence he'd collected over the past weeks. Photos of Laura and Aiden, recordings of their conversations, financial reports proving Aiden's fraud at Brightwave Consulting. His laptop screen glowed, open to a draft of the speech Nathan was preparing for Grace on Tech's annual corporate party. The event, which drew investors, partners, and the press, was supposed to be his triumph, the moment when he would publicly expose Laura and Aiden, destroying their reputations. He picked up the folder of photographs Mark Reynolds had given him. The pictures were clear: Laura and Aiden in a restaurant, their hands intertwined, kissing in a car, walking out of a hotel, clinging to each other. Each frame was a knife to the heart, but Nathan had long ago learned to suppress the pain. The images were his weapons now. He put the photographs aside and opened the audio files on his laptop. The recording of their argument in the coffee shop, where Laura accused Aiden of infidelity and he suspected her of leaking the data, was especially valuable. Their own words incriminated them. The financial documents were no less damaging. An audit initiated by Nathan had uncovered transfers into Brightwave accounts, nearly $500,000 signed by Aiden. Nathan had added to the report the fake emails he'd planted in the system to bolster Aiden's guilt. The board was already against him, and Nathan knew that after the party, Aiden would face not only his firing, but also a possible criminal investigation. He opened the document with the speech and began editing. The text had to be precise, without unnecessary emotion, but with crushing force. Nathan wrote, "Ladies and gentlemen, today we celebrate the success of Grace on Tech. But I must share with you an unpleasant truth. Our partner, Aiden Clark, betrayed our trust. He siphoned off hundreds of thousands of dollars through a shell company, Brightwave Consulting. The evidence is overwhelming. Here are the reports, here are his signatures. But that's not all. Aiden also engaged in an inappropriate relationship with my wife, Laura Grayson, behind my back. I have photographs, recordings, and other evidence of their relationship. This betrayal is not only personal, but professional as well. I demand Aiden's immediate removal and a renegotiation of all contracts involving Laura and her foundation." Nathan reread the text. It was straightforward, but that was the point. No metaphors, no innuendo, just facts that would hit Laura and Aiden like a hammer. He'd added footnotes to the evidence so he could point it out on the screen as he spoke. The presentation was already there: slides with photos, excerpts from financial reports, timelines of their meetings. He leaned back in his chair and glanced at his watch: midnight. The party was in 2 days, in the ballroom of the Plaza Hotel. Invitations had been sent out, the press had confirmed attendance. Nathan knew Laura and Aiden would be there. As his wife and head of the foundation, Laura always gave a short speech about the charity's projects. Aiden, despite being on vacation, had been invited. Nathan had insisted that he attend, supposedly to clear up the audit situation. It was a trap, and they were both walking into it. Nathan stood up and walked over to the safe where the prenuptial agreement was kept. He pulled it out and flipped through to the infidelity clause. The document was his trump card against Laura. Once exposed, he would file for divorce, activate the contract, and strip her of everything: her money, her status, her foundation. She would be left with nothing, and her reputation as a philanthropist would be ruined. Aiden faced a different fate. Nathan had already contacted lawyers who were preparing materials to hand over to law enforcement. The Brightwave scam could cost him his freedom. He put the contract back and closed the safe. His plan was almost complete, but Nathan felt he had to check it one more time. He called Reynolds, despite the late hour. "Mark, it's Nathan," he said when the detective answered. "Do you have any news on Laura and Aiden?" "They met today," Reynolds said. "Quick meeting in the park. They were arguing. Laura seemed on the verge of a breakdown, saying she couldn't lie anymore. Aiden tried to calm her down, but she left. Do you want the recording?" "Send them," Nathan said, And one more thing. Be at the party at the plaza the day after tomorrow. Just in case. I want you to record their reaction. Okay, Reynolds replied. I'll be there. Nathan hung up and went back to his laptop. He added one last slide to the presentation, a black background with white text. Betrayal has a price. It was his message to Laura and Aiden. They thought they could fool him, but they would soon find out how wrong they were. He saved the file and closed his laptop. It was time for bed. Laura was already asleep in their bedroom, unaware that her world was about to collapse. Nathan walked into the living room, poured himself a whiskey, and looked out the window at the city. His heart still ached from the betrayal, but his anger was stronger. He had done everything he could to make this moment perfect. The party would be more than just a celebration. It would be Judgment Day for those who dared to betray him. Nathan finished his whiskey and headed for the bedroom. He lay down next to Laura, trying not to look at her. Her steady breathing irritated him, but he closed his eyes and forced himself to relax. 2 days, 2 more days, and it would be over. He imagined their faces when the truth came out, and for the first time in weeks, he felt something like satisfaction. The Plaza Hotel ballroom was ablaze with crystal chandeliers. Long tables, covered in white tablecloths, were laden with champagne flutes and gourmet hors d'oeuvres. The air was buzzing with conversation as investors, partners, and journalists discussed Grace Ontech's progress, exchanging compliments and gossip. The annual corporate party was in full swing, and Nathan Grayson, dressed in a black tuxedo, stood at the edge of the stage, surveying the crowd. His expression was calm, but inside, he could feel the adrenaline coursing through his veins. Tonight, it would all end. Laura stood nearby, dressed in an elegant blue dress, chatting with a group of donors to her charity. She was smiling, but Nathan noticed the way her fingers were nervously clenching her glass. Aiden was across the room, surrounded by colleagues. He looked tense, glancing at Laura every now and then. Nathan knew they were barely speaking after the fights he had provoked. Their trust in each other had been shattered, and now it was time to deliver the final blow. The evening's host, a charismatic man in a red tie, walked onto the stage and took the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, your attention, he announced. Today, we celebrate another successful year for Grace Ontech. Please welcome our CEO, Nathan Grayson. The crowd erupted in applause. Nathan walked up to the stage, nodded to the host, and took the microphone. He glanced around the crowd, lingering on Laura and Aiden. Laura was looking at him with a small smile, but her eyes were filled with worry. Aiden gritted his teeth, clearly expecting a trick. Thank you to everyone who came today, Nathan began, his voice steady and confident. This has been an incredible year for Grace Ontech. We launched a new platform, raised millions in funding, and solidified our place in the market. But I'm not here just to celebrate our successes. The room fell silent. Nathan paused, letting the tension build. He saw Laura frown and Aiden step closer to the stage. Unfortunately, Nathan continued, I must report a betrayal that threatens our company and my personal trust. Aiden Clark, my partner and friend, has not only violated business ethics, but has betrayed me on a personal level. There were murmurs of surprise in the room. Aiden turned pale, his fists clenched. Nathan, what are you doing? He shouted, but his voice was drowned out by the noise of the crowd. Nathan raised his hand for silence and nodded to the technician at the projector. The first slide appeared on the large screen behind him, a photo of Aiden and Laura kissing in a car. The room gasped. Laura covered her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. This is my wife, Laura Grayson and Aiden Clark, Nathan said, his tone cold. They were having an affair behind my back. I have recordings of their conversations to prove it. He played the audio file. Laura's voice, shaky and panicked, filled the room. Aiden, I don't know how to tell him. He'll be furious. Then Aiden's voice, he won't know. We'll be careful. The murmurs in the crowd grew to a roar. Journalists began pulling out their phones, filming the scene. Laura swayed, and one of her colleagues grabbed her arm. She looked at Nathan, her face a mixture of horror and shame. Nathan, please, she whispered, but he didn't pay attention to her. But that's not all, Nathan continued, switching slides. Financial reports appeared on the screen. Aiden siphoned off nearly $500,000 through a shell company called Brightwave Consulting. Here are his signatures on the payments. Here are the emails asking for his tracks to be covered. The board of directors is already aware, and I've forwarded the materials to law enforcement. Aiden stepped towards the stage, his face red with anger. "That's a lie," he screamed. "Nathan, you set me up. You can't." His words were interrupted by two men in dark suits emerging from a side entrance. One of them showed a badge. "Aiden Clark, you are under arrest on suspicion of fraud and embezzlement," he said, grabbing Aiden's arm. No, Aiden tried to break free, but the second man put handcuffs on him. "Nathan, you will pay for this." The crowd parted as Aiden was led away, cameras clicking, capturing his every move. Laura couldn't take it anymore and ran for the exit, her heels clicking on the marble floor. She was crying, covering her face with her hands. Several guests tried to stop her, but she pushed them away and ran out of the room. Nathan watched her go, his face impassive. The room was buzzing. People were whispering. Journalists were already scribbling headlines. He picked up the microphone and continued. "Grace on Tech will continue to operate despite this betrayal. I apologize for the scandal, but the truth had to come out. Thank you for your trust. Enjoy your evening." He walked off the stage to a smattering of applause. Some investors looked shocked, others admired his decisiveness. Nathan headed for the bar, ignoring the reporters' questions. He ordered a whiskey and took a sip, feeling the tension slowly ease. His plan worked. Laura and Aiden were destroyed. She lost her reputation. He lost his freedom. Nathan knew that tomorrow the headlines would scream about the scandal, and his prenuptial agreement would ensure Laura's financial ruin. But deep down, he felt no joy, only emptiness. He finished his whiskey and looked at the empty hall where music had been blaring just a moment ago. Mark Reynolds, standing at the exit, nodded to him, confirming that everything was recorded. Nathan nodded back and went outside. The cold air hit his face, but he didn't pay attention to it. His revenge was complete. The morning after the plaza party began with headlines. Nathan sat in his office, scrolling through the news on his tablet. Grace on Tech scandal, partner accused of fraud, affair with CEO's wife, screamed the front page of the Wall Street Journal. The New York Post was even more blunt. Millionaire exposes wife, friends cheating in front of elite. Photos of Laura running away in tears and Aiden in handcuffs filled the internet. Nathan closed his tablet and leaned back in his chair. His plan had worked perfectly, but his chest felt empty. Laura hadn't returned home from the party. Nathan knew she was staying with her friend Kate because Reynolds, his detective, had reported her that morning. Her phone was off, but Nathan had no intention of finding her. He'd already instructed his lawyers to prepare divorce papers, citing the prenuptial agreement. The infidelity clause had been triggered. Laura would lose her right to his assets, their joint accounts, their real estate. Her charity, which depended on their money, was on the verge of closing. Donors had begun to pull their support after the scandal. Nathan opened her banking app and checked her personal account. There was less than $1,000 left. He didn't block it, let Laura see for herself how quickly her world was crumbling. He knew she was used to luxury, designer dresses, restaurants, trips. Without his money, she couldn't maintain that lifestyle. Her reputation as a philanthropist, which she was so proud of, was in tatters. Social media was full of comments: gold digger, traitor, hypocrite. Nathan imagined Laura reading this, sitting in Kate's small apartment, and felt nothing but cold indifference. Aiden was in even worse shape. After being arrested at the party, he was taken to the police station. That morning, Nathan received a call from his lawyer, who informed him that the prosecutor's office had opened an investigation into charges of fraud and embezzlement. The evidence Nathan had collected: financial statements, forged letters, correspondence with Lawson had been turned over to the authorities. Aiden was released on bail, but his lawyer had already warned that this was serious. If convicted, he could face up to 7 years in prison. Grace Ontek formally suspended him from his position, and the board of directors voted to expel him from the company. Aiden had lost everything: his career, his reputation, his future. Nathan stood and walked to the window, looking out at Manhattan. He should have felt triumphant. Laura and Aiden had paid for their betrayal, just as he had planned. But instead of satisfaction, he felt only heaviness. Their fall had not given him peace. It had not erased the pain of his wife and best friend lying to him, scheming behind his back, expecting a child that could never be his. He had won, but the victory was hollow. His phone vibrated. It was a message from Melissa, the CFO. Melissa: Nathan, the investors are nervous about the scandal. Some want a meeting. We need to calm them down. When are you free? Nathan sighed. The scandal had hit not only Laura and Aiden, but Grace Ontek as well. The company's stock had fallen 5% in the morning, and the press was already speculating about a leadership crisis. He wrote back, Nathan, tomorrow at 10 a.m., prepare a stability report. We will convince them. He put the phone down and walked back to his desk. He had work to do to keep the company afloat, but his thoughts kept returning to Laura. He imagined her sitting alone, penniless, without friends who had turned their backs on him after the scandal. Her foundation, her passion, her pride, it was all gone. Nathan knew she blamed him, but he didn't regret it. She had made her choice when she went to bed with Aiden. By evening, Reynolds had sent a new report. Laura had tried to withdraw money from her personal account, but she couldn't pay the rent for the foundation's office. She had called donors, but no one had agreed to help. Aiden, meanwhile, had met with his lawyer, but his chances of being acquitted were minimal. Nathan read the report and put his phone down. He didn't need to monitor them anymore. They were broken. He poured himself a whiskey and sat down on the living room couch. The penthouse felt too big, too empty without Laura. Her things were still there: a pair of shoes by the door, a scarf on a hanger. Nathan knew he would put them away soon, but he couldn't bring himself to do so yet. He took a sip and closed his eyes. The victory was his, but it brought no relief. He felt as lonely as when he learned the truth. The phone vibrated again. It was a letter from a lawyer. The draft of the divorce papers was ready. All that was left was to sign them. Nathan opened the file and skimmed the text. Everything was according to the contract. Laura would not receive anything. He signed it electronically and sent it back. That was the final nail in her coffin. Nathan looked out the window at the city. The lights of New York were bright, but to him they were cold. He had achieved his goal, but he was alone. Nathan stood in his penthouse, looking out at the empty living room. The marble floor gleamed under the chandelier. The glass walls reflected the lights of New York, but everything around him seemed dead. Laura had been gone for a week. She had never returned after the scandal at the party. Her things were gone. Kate, her friend, had taken them while Nathan was at the office. All that remained was a pair of forgotten earrings on the nightstand, which he hadn't touched. He felt no relief, no triumph, only an emptiness that filled every corner of his house and his chest. That morning, he held a meeting with investors, trying to reassure them after the scandal. Melissa had prepared a report providing Grace Ontek's financial stability, but Nathan could see the skepticism in their eyes. Two key partners had already canceled their contracts, citing reputational risks. The company's shares had fallen another 3%, and analysts were predicting further declines. The press continued to chew on the story. Grayson exposes wife and friend, but who will pay for the chaos? Read the Forbes headline. Nathan knew that it would take months, if not years, to rebuild trust. His revenge on Laura and Aiden had cost him more than he had bargained for. He poured himself a whiskey and sat down on the couch where he and Laura had once watched movies, laughed, and planned the future. Now those memories seemed alien, like stills from an old movie. He took a sip, but the taste was bitter. Nathan pulled out his phone and opened his email. The lawyer had sent confirmation. The divorce papers had been filed. Laura had signed them without contesting. The prenuptial agreement had worked. She had received nothing. Her foundation was officially closed. Without Nathan's money and the support of its sponsors, it hadn't lasted a week. Nathan learned from Reynolds that Laura had rented a small apartment in Brooklyn and was looking for work, but her reputation was in tatters. No one wanted to mess with a woman whose name had become synonymous with scandal. Aiden was broken too. His fraud case was headed toward trial. Prosecutors had added new charges based on evidence Nathan had passed along through his lawyers. Aiden had sold his apartment to pay for a lawyer and was staying with his brother while he awaited sentencing. Nathan wasn't keeping tabs on him directly. Reynolds was no longer needed, but news filtered through his colleagues. Aiden, once confident and charismatic, was a shadow of his former self. Nathan should have been happy, but he couldn't. Their fall hadn't restored his lost trust, hadn't healed the wounds. He stood and walked to the window. The city was as glittering as ever, but Nathan felt cut off from it. His penthouse, his company, his millions, it was all empty. He remembered Laura walking in for the first time, admiring the view, drinking wine and talking until the early hours. He remembered Aiden clapping him on the shoulder, calling him brother, when they signed their first big deal. Those moments had been real, but now they felt like lies. He'd trusted them, opened his heart to them, and they'd broken it. The phone vibrated. It was a message from Melissa. Melissa, Nathan, another investor has pulled out of the project. I need to call the board urgently. Will tomorrow at 8 and be okay? Nathan wrote back. Nathan, yes, it does. Thank you, Melissa. He put the phone down and took another sip of whiskey. The company was his life, but even that now seemed fragile. The scandal had shaken the trust of not only his partners, but his employees as well. Some began to whisper that Nathan had been too harsh with Aiden, that his revenge had gone too far. He knew he had to pull himself together, take back control, but he couldn't. For the first time in years, he felt lost. Nathan walked into the bedroom and stopped by the bed. The empty half where Laura slept felt foreign. He lay down, still dressed, and stared at the ceiling. His mind replayed the events of the last few months. The messages on Laura's old phone, the photos from Reynolds, her tears at the party, Aiden in handcuffs. He had gotten justice, but at what cost? His heart was broken, his home was empty, his company was under attack. He had won a battle, but he had lost something bigger. Nathan closed his eyes and tried to remember the last time he'd felt happy. It had been before all of this, before the suspicion, before the betrayal. Maybe it had been the night he and Laura had walked through Central Park, eating hot dogs and laughing at a street musician. Or when he and Aiden had shared a beer at a bar, celebrating the launch of their first product. Those moments were gone, and Nathan knew they would never come back. He turned on his side and looked at Laura's earrings lying on the nightstand. They were small, silver, with blue stones. He had given them to her for her first wedding anniversary. Nathan reached out, took them, and squeezed them in his fist. He wanted to throw them away, but he couldn't. Not now. He put the earrings back and closed his eyes. Tomorrow will be a new day, new problems, new battles. But today, he allowed himself to just lie there, surrounded by luxury that meant nothing, and feel his broken heart beat in the silence. That morning, he received a letter from Grace on Tech's board of directors. They demanded his resignation, arguing that the scandal had undermined investor and employee confidence. The company's stock had fallen 10% in 2 weeks, and a major contract with a European partner had fallen through. Nathan didn't argue. He was tired of fighting. His revenge on Laura and Aiden had destroyed not only their world, but his own. The company he had spent 10 years building was now a liability. He sat down at his desk and opened his laptop. On the screen was a draft of the letter he had started writing the day before, offering to sell Grace on Tech. Several competitors had already expressed interest, and Nathan knew the deal would make millions. But he no longer cared about the money. He wanted to get out, leave everything behind: the penthouse, the company, New York. He finished the letter, indicating that he was willing to negotiate with the buyers, and sent it to the board. Then he closed the laptop and took a sip of whiskey. The decision had been made. Nathan stood up and walked back to the window. He thought about the price of justice. His revenge was precise, like a surgical strike. Laura had lost everything: the foundation, her reputation, her money. She was now working as an administrator at a small school in Brooklyn, barely making ends meet. Aiden was awaiting trial. His lawyer was not optimistic. They had paid for the betrayal, but Nathan did not feel like a winner. His heart was broken, his life empty. He remembered his childhood. His drunken father, his mother's screams, the nights he hid in the closet so as not to hear their arguments. He had sworn then that he would never become like them. But looking back on his path, he realized that he had become worse. His anger, his thirst for revenge had made him the man he despised. Nathan clenched his fists. He couldn't change the past, but he could choose the future. His thoughts went back to the kids who grew up like him. Kids from dysfunctional families with no chance at a normal life. Laura had worked with them through her foundation, and Nathan had seen her projects change lives. Maybe this was his path to redemption. Not a foundation, not flashy campaigns, but something real helping those who needed it. He imagined opening centers for teenagers where they could learn, find support, and build dreams. It wouldn't bring Laura or Aiden back, it wouldn't erase the pain, but maybe it would give them meaning. Nathan took out his phone and texted his lawyer. Nathan, prepare documents to create a non-profit organization. The goal is to help children from poor areas. I want to start in a month. The answer came within a minute. Lawyer, got it. Name, budget? Nathan thought about it. The title didn't matter, but he wrote, Nathan, call it New Start. Budget $10 million to start. He sent the message and felt a little relieved. This was the first step. He would sell the company, sell the penthouse, and leave New York. Maybe Chicago or Boston, somewhere no one knew him. He would start over, but this time not for money or power, but for something more. Nathan walked back to the window and looked out at the city. New York was beautiful, but cruel. It had given him everything: wealth, success, love, and then taken it away. Nathan didn't regret his choice. Laura and Aiden deserved their fate, but he didn't want to remain a man consumed by revenge. He wanted to be better. He raised his glass as if saluting the city and whispered, Goodbye. Then he finished his whiskey and put the glass on the table. Tomorrow he will begin to sort out his life, step by step. Nathan stood on the balcony of the small Chicago apartment he'd moved to a month ago. New York was a thing of the past. The penthouse had been sold. Grace on Tech had been handed over to new owners for a sum that would give him the freedom to choose. The cold wind off Lake Michigan ruffled his hair as he held a mug of black coffee in his hands. The city was new, foreign, but that was exactly what Nathan needed. A clean slate, a chance to start over. The sale of the company went smoothly, though the headlines still trumpeted his departure. Grayson leaves Empire after scandal. Nathan hadn't read the articles. He knew that Laura was now living in Brooklyn, working as a secretary at a school, and that Aiden was preparing for a trial that would likely end in a conviction. Their fates no longer mattered to him. He had exacted his revenge, but the price, loneliness and emptiness, had been too high. Now he was searching for meaning to fill that emptiness. His new nonprofit, Fresh Start, was up and running. Nathan had invested $15 million in it, hiring a team to set up support centers for at-risk teens. The first center opened in Chicago last week, a small building with computer labs, a library, and a counseling room. Nathan was there for the opening, watching the kids, many of whom resembled his younger self, incredulously examine their new laptops. He didn't give a speech, didn't seek praise. He was content to see their faces, the mixture of curiosity and hope. It was the first thing he'd seen in a long time that made him feel alive. At night, however, the loneliness returned. Nathan lived alone, without friends, without family. His apartment was modest, no marble floors, no panoramic windows, just the bare necessities, a bed, a table, a couple of shelves with books. He did not want to return to the luxury that reminded him of the past. But sometimes, looking at the empty walls, he wondered if he would ever be able to trust people again. Today was his first day off in a month. Nathan decided to walk to a local cafe he had heard about from his neighbors. Bean and Leaf was a cozy place with wooden tables and the smell of freshly ground coffee. He ordered an espresso and sat by the window, watching the people pass by. People were rushing about their business, laughing, talking. Nathan felt detached, but it was better than the pain that tormented him in New York. His gaze fell on a woman who walked into the cafe. She was in her 30s, with dark hair pulled back into a messy bun and a simple denim jacket. She was holding a laptop and a folder of papers. She ordered a coffee and sat down at a nearby table, opening her laptop. Nathan noticed her frown at the screen and muttered something under her breath. Her energy, a mixture of concentration and mild irritation, seemed familiar. He couldn't help but smile. The woman looked up and caught his gaze. Nathan froze for a second, but she smiled back, not coquettishly, just friendly. "What, you hate it when Wi-Fi goes down too?" she asked, pointing to her laptop. Nathan was slightly taken aback, but replied, "It happens, especially when you need to send something urgently." "Exactly," she said, rolling her eyes. "I'm trying to finish a grant for my program, and the internet decided it wasn't my day." "Program?" Nathan asked, interested. "What kind?" She looked at him as if weighing whether to share, but then shrugged. "I work with teenagers from shelters. I teach them the basics of programming. Nothing grandiose, but if at least one child finds a job instead of the street, that's already a victory." Nathan nodded, feeling something stir in his chest. Her words were close to him, too close. "It's important," he said. "I'm working on a similar project, too. Centers for children from poor areas." Her eyebrows rose, and she looked at him with new interest. "Seriously? In Chicago? What's it called?" "A New Start," Nathan replied. "We've just begun." "Cool," she said, her smile widening. "Maybe we should exchange contacts. I'm always looking for partners. My name is Sophia, by the way." "Nathan," he said, holding out his hand. She shook his hand, her grip firm, confident. They exchanged numbers, and Sophia went back to her laptop. But Nathan noticed that she glanced at him a couple of times while she worked. He finished his coffee and left the cafe, feeling a warmth he hadn't felt in months. It wasn't love or even attraction, just a spark, a hint of the possibility of a new beginning. Back at his apartment, Nathan stood by the window again, looking out at Chicago. The city wasn't as vibrant as New York, but it had its own life, its own energy. He thought about Sophia, about her words about teenagers, about her smile. Maybe it was an accident. Maybe it was fate. Or maybe it was just another trap, like Laura. Nathan shook his head. He didn't know what would happen next, and for the first time, it didn't scare him. He took out his phone and wrote to his lawyer. "Nathan, increase the New Start budget to $20 million. And find a place for a second center." Then he looked at the city and whispered, "Let's see what you've prepared for me." Somewhere deep in his soul, hope burned, faint but stubborn. Life had given him a second chance, and he wasn't going to waste it. But there was intrigue in the air. Who was Sophia? Another ally, another betrayal, or something entirely new? Nathan didn't know the answer, but he was ready to find out. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.